welcome to the What Not to Do in Entrepreneurship podcast. I'm your host, Michael Fritz, and I'm here today with Sanjeev Chitri, author of the book of the same name, What Not to Do in Entrepreneurship. And I've had an awesome time just getting with Sanjeev and selfishly learning a lot of cool stuff. So if you're just getting started, just getting acquainted, you can expect to learn things about, well, what not to do if you're going to start a business and what pitfalls to avoid. And with so many people starting businesses and the vast majority of them failing, Sanjeev is in a position to really move the needle, really change the world, and increase that level of success. I mean, even if 5% more of businesses are successful, Sanjeev, man, that is like probably trillions of dollars that are going to be injected into the economy. So I want to welcome the listeners to listen in and just to get people caught up. Last time, Sanjeev, we had talked about, well, a lot of different things, but one thing in particular was, kind of looking back on a history of entrepreneurship. And you had said that you wanted to look at like a 7-year segment of time in the history of an entrepreneur's journey. So, um, I guess let's kick things off and thanks for being available. But what's a typical 7-year journey of an entrepreneur look like?
Yeah. So, Michael, when you try to bring some level of science and predictability into art or chaos of a field,
Mhm.
then you have to invent or bring about some tools, and secondly, of course, you have to look at history and try to look at, is there a pattern
Mhm.
in which these things are following. Now, there are, like we spoke about earlier, there are different kinds of entrepreneurship. You know, to summarize, I call the horizontal entrepreneurship, which is like somebody, you have a hotel or a motel and you want to open a next location.
Mhm.
It's very much the same.
Right.
Franchising is a lot like horizontal entrepreneurship. And then there is the vertical entrepreneurship, which sort of, if you have a grocery store and you want to open a restaurant, then you are extending the use of that food chain up or down, or a distributor want to become a distributor.
Okay.
Then that's, so if you go up the supply chain or down the supply chain, or even in technology, if you are making parts and now you want to make assemble systems, then it's a sort of the what I consider the category of vertical entrepreneurship. So the risks are slightly higher, but the customer base is known, and you have to obviously expand the value proposition.
Okay.
And then the third type of entrepreneurship, which a lot of the villagers and a lot of people are already doing, that is really called opportunistic entrepreneurship.
Okay.
There is a problem, a challenge, a need, especially this pandemic. I can tell you that the all COVID vaccines,
Mhm.
if are truly just because they needed the infrastructure, but they are an total new business segments for even established businesses, and I call that as opportunistic entrepreneurship, right?
Okay.
Or people, making sanitizers and things like that for the COVIDs. And there are other opportunistic, entrepreneurships like that. And so that, and it is not necessarily an historically existing marketplace, but there seems to be an entrepreneur looks at it and says, wow, I can solve it, and provides a solution to it, and it is an entrepreneurial venture.
Mhm.
And then the fourth kind of entrepreneurship that I define is what I consider as disruptive entrepreneurship, or innovation entrepreneurship. In that, you know you totally change the way business is done. You are a disruptor, or you're thinking like a disruptor, and there obviously anything like that has a high rate of risk, but the rewards are also significant. And in the book, I deal with this under the various science of the universe, which is what you know is a small segment of the universe. You know what you know is slightly bigger than you know what you know, and the largest segment is you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
And so I say in the book that the horizontal entrepreneurship falls in the you know what you know. You know a hotel, you're just building another you know what you know. You don't know what you know what you don't know is you don't know the distribution business, but you are in the food retail business. You can definitely get to the know portion of it from the don't know. You get to the don't know portion of it from the know portion of it.
Right.
And then Uber know nothing about taxis, and just decided, or Airbnb, two guys decided that they wanted to provide a better solution for people to sleep, and Airbnb happens. And or how can we use useless cars that are not being used, Uber happens. So those types of things are I consider as disruptive entrepreneurship. And there is a new category which I believe should be used, if not at least by the first time entrepreneurs, some serial entrepreneurs, which is called the buy, then build. That
Okay.
means there is so much capital available, and it's going to be available more and more, that experienced and entrepreneurs can have access to capital to buy an existing infrastructure of business, and then leverage that infrastructure to either get market share, market expansion, etc., etc.
Right.
So, but there is a book on it called Buy Then Build, and I am a firm supporter of this for entrepreneurship. A, because it provides a pathway for founders to execute founder-controlled consolidation in the Buy Then Build, and I have spoken about that in the book also.
Yeah.
So each one of these entrepreneurships, especially the first three, four kinds, have a certain journey to it. And the journey may be 3 years in some cases, 10 years in other cases. But a typical averaged out statistically journey is a 7-year cycle. And so that's why I called it the 7-year journey of an entrepreneur.
Okay.
It has its own flexibilities. And the purpose for me in really focusing on this and enabling this is for allowing and asking the entrepreneurs to look at risk versus reward at each stage of the business. It is important that entrepreneurs go in this with their eyes wide open, and saying, what is my appetite, what is my rewards, what are my chances. And so that 7-year journey is a pathway to that kind of thinking. Now, how did I start the whole thinking of 7 years of a journey, and what does it, sort of statistically look like, and then what does it process wise looks like? It is really a chart, and you can see it in the book. It is broken down in 7 steps, of course. 7 year, each year is a step. But overall, from a strategy point of view, you have to think that most people, when they sleep or sit on the pot, get an idea,
Hmm.
right? They always have somebody, their minds are amazing. So even people are corporate, they have an idea. Like if I did this, and most of them, oh, if I had a restaurant, when they go to eat, they think, oh, I should really own a restaurant, things like that. Everywhere there's some idea. So let's assume for a second that this we have a million of such souls thinking at a time that they have an idea.
Hmm.
And ideas have no value. They cost nothing. They just kind of circulate in the brain. And so the investment in having an idea is zero, right? Now, in order to take that idea from their idea to doing something, some effort, and pursuing it as a possibility of a potential venture. Out of the million of those people, at best, maybe 1,000 would be able to transform or create that into something that can enable them to pursue that. It takes a year or so for them. So this is when the 7-year journey has started now,
Right.
right? So maybe 1,000 of them at best, number is smaller, but I'm giving the credit to it. So they can say, okay, I can go ask my mother or my grandmother for some money. I can try, I can hook up some pluggy setup and see if this idea works, or I can do it on my computer, whatever that is.
Right.
And that I call it as an alpha stage, and the investment on a 0 to 10 scale of relative investments required, if 10 being whatever, it's 10 million, 1 million, whatever it is, the relative scale. The first level or the first step requires maybe less than a half of that, of the size of the investment required, and the time is 1 year approximately.
Mhm.
So 500 to, let's just say 1,000 people have reached that stage. So you can think the amount of people that have just dropped off, who don't have the ability or the capability or the desire or the passion to transform their idea into something demonstrable. Then out of those 1,000 people, who then say, oh, I have an idea, maybe I can build a product out of this that I can show to some customers or to somebody. So if the first one was an alpha type, we call it in engineering, then the second one can be considered as a prototype or a beta type version.
Right.
And the amount of the 1,000 people may be at best, 50 to 75 people will be able to make that happen. Right? So now the million who had dreamt are dwindled down to about 50 to 75 at best. That is, time has equaled 2 years. Idea has become now has matured into a little bit more better into what would be considered as a prototype unit time. And the investment may be somewhere on a 0 to 10 scale, about half to one, a little bit more than an idea for the that demonstrated, but this is that money still may come from your grandmother or your uncle or your friends or anything of that kind.
Right.
At that point in time, you can see that, oh, is it something that I can show? What is the reaction I can get from the customer? Again, business entrepreneurship is nothing but a solution to something that a marketplace wants. As if there is a marketplace, there is a business. If there is no marketplace, there is no business. And entrepreneurship, like I've said, is a transaction of the value you create with what the market is willing to pay. That is the simplest definition of entrepreneurship. Right?
Right. Right.
So then, out of those 50 people that succeeded from the million thought, they started with a thought, then have to now actually build something that is testable, customer deliverable. So you would consider it as the first product. It takes about a year is three. Investments in that on a 1 to 2 scale are about 1.5 or so, and those monies can come from angel funds or something like that. But now you have taken that idea, tried the prototype, and are now willing to send it to a customer or have somebody test it. Right?
Mhm.
So 3 years have gone, and the amount of people that succeed out of that is less than 20 to 25 people. Out of the million that you started, 3 years have gone, and somewhere on a 0 to 10 scale, 1.5 times. But the entrepreneur has developed a product or a service, whatever that is, to be able to have a customer test it, right?
Okay.
So currently, the risks have been lowered because the capital has come from friends and family or maybe some seed funds. You are still in control of your destiny, right? And now you have shown it to a customer and the customer likes it. So now you have to go into what is called as the pilot production version of it, right? Year is four. Investments are around 2 to 2.5 on the relative scale. And out of the 20, 25 people, at best, uh, Michael, maybe 10 to 15 people at best are able to create that transition, right? But now you have a product that is in pilot manufacturing, not a full scale manufacturing yet. And the amount of investments is between 2 and a half and at best that I believe is the relative investment in size. That money comes from either angels or initial venture funds or something like that, right? So year is four. You now have a pilot production of your whatever product or service that you have done, and you have still control of your destiny. And because you've taken some money from the angels, maybe you've shown it to a VC, you have a customer, and you understand where the market is going. Now, that out of that, to really create a full scale production where the customer demand is repeated, where there are orders that can be created into a business, year is five, and amount of investments are between 5 and 6 on a relative 10 scale. Right now, so at this point in time, you need growth capital. That growth capital is coming from Series A of venture funds or corporate venture funds or things like that. But you now have out of those 15 people or 12 to 15 people, at best, maybe 5 to 8 people who have now achieved that manufacturability and scalability of it. Right. So that year is five, and now you feel like a company. Of course, because you have taken other people's money at this point in time, you don't have the control of the company unless it is designed to be able to do that. But because so much money has come in from outside in order to support the growth, of course, the valuation is growing, the wealth is growing, but now you have the professional organization, which is what you had said in your thing. How is there a mental transition in your earlier uh, episode? There are commandos and then there are the professionals, right?
Yeah.
So the money people, they think that there is a distinction between the commandos and the production people, and I disagree. Because if you look at the most successful entrepreneurs, whether it is Elon, whether it is Mark Zuckerberg, or whether it is Larry Ellison, they are able to create within their control because they structured the company in that way to be able to manage their growth and manage their transition from being a commando to being a production company. Venture capital and outside capital doesn't believe as much in it. I rather provide the backing and the resources, because who knows that business better than the commando team that has been? And if most of them are open to creating a transition, it is the responsibility of entrepreneurship. The only way you can do that is if you keep your destiny in control and not fall for the golden rule of capital, which is the person with the gold rules. And that is another chapter in the book we are going to talk about how to manage the golden rule of capital, right?
Awesome.
Right. And
Yeah.
so now you are in the fifth year, about to lose the control of your company because you have to support the customer growth, unless you have designed and structured the company in that manner. And now, after the manufacturing is done, now you need to go into global markets. And that requires the year six, which is the scale of somewhere between investment between 7 to 9. And at that point in time, yes, your wealth has increased significantly, but your percentage ownership in the company has decreased significantly because you have gotten other capitals to come, whether this is mezzanine capital, whether it is institutional capital, all of that is now in. And in that case, my friend, out of the 7 to 10 people, barely 3 to 5 can make that stage happen, which is this global stuff. So now we started with 1 million ideas. Out of that, we barely got 1,000 people to be able to come to building companies in the first stage. We got the first prototype to be about 100 to 200, which is where the 3 to 5% is coming from,
Mhm.
right? And now we have transformed that into 3 to 5, and out of that, maybe one or two becomes unicorn, and the remaining becomes reasonably good successful companies. It is the seventh year is the exit year. I call it the year of liquidity,
Okay.
in which case all the entrepreneurs, all the investors, all of that have a pathway to creating liquid wealth. So that is what the 7 year journey is. Now, it's wonderful to talk about it, but how do you understand the risk of it? So as you can see, when you are in, it is risk is related to two things: success of product in the marketplace and your ability to control the company from being a commando team to being a professional team, which is what you were talking about in the earlier task, right?
Yep. Yep.
So those teams, now you of course need, you can't have a controller who is managing a P&L on a small book to become a public company, because the disciplines are different.
Right.
Yes, so you of course have to bring in different capability teams. I am talking about the controlling of the team. Now, some people can never make this transition from the journey in 2 years, 3 years to the seventh year. Their mental state is not designed to manage that. Those people, of course, then get either put away, leave. But I believe the entrepreneurial team that can start should be able to manage this transition. Now, if 1,000 people start with the product and 3 or 4, 5 people come up with a successful story, then we have to see how to minimize this failure rate, because the journey is approximately the same.
Hmm.
And this is where I wanted to use the definition of risk mitigation to a 7 year journey.
Okay.
So let's say at the end of the third year, the founder has developed a product. He's built the idea into a product. He's convinced the demonstration, and he's now doing pilot manufacturing. He's barely invested two and a half on a 0 to 10 scale of dollars. But now, if he finds a corporate partner, or if he finds a a company that is willing to take and commercialize his product, then he can sell that portion of the company with much higher probability of success, because the corporate infrastructure will drive it to future success.
Right.
So he has not gotten as much huge amounts of potential rewards that he may get if he becomes one out of the 5 successors or the 2, 3 successors at the end of the 7 years. But the problem, because he is now in one out of the 50, not one out of the 1,000. He is out of the 50, not out of the 2 or the 5.
Right.
Right? So the probability of success has increased. And now, yes, he hasn't gotten the huge home run rewards, but he has been now called a successful entrepreneur, he or she again, because the company has now been commercialized through a third party by licensing or whatever other methods of business associations can be. And so to think, so essentially, the entrepreneur just moved a molehill. He didn't move a mountain,
Yes.
and created measurable success, which then he can exit and start all over again and become a serial entrepreneur. But now he has a track record of success with the higher probability. So then he or she has mitigated the risk of failure by creating an earlier exit or earlier partnerships. The similar thing we can happen at the stage 4 if you miss the stage 3.
Hmm.
You now are manufacturing, but you can create partnership for sales and marketing and application engineering and reduce the risk further, right? But exit it in that manner. So once you become that you can bring experience and experience infrastructure earlier to minimize your ability or take the chances to not drive all the way to the end, creates the smaller molehills of success with higher probabilities than trying to become one of the few that succeeds through the exit stages. Now, it doesn't mean that it should not be done, but it means that entrepreneurs can create smaller success, become serial entrepreneurs, and not everybody has to target for a home run, you know.
Yeah.
Now, it happens naturally, Michael, because if you get somebody like SoftBank or somebody like that giving you, so what happens is the moment your entrepreneurial venture is transformed from being a grit venture to being a glamour venture, which means that for that venture somebody gave you $500 million or invested in it, overnight you transform into a glamour venture. That's a but the grit venture is 99.9% of entrepreneurship. Glamour ventureship is less than 0.1, 0.2% of entrepreneurship base.
Right.
So you should always be open if something like that happens, but count what it is, design what it is, and you can always drive for the exit. If you don't like the price, you go to the next stage. But keep opening. I call this engineering exits.
Hmm.
You have so you have to engineer exits in this. And the best way to engineer an exit, Michael, is to put a mirror across at the stage at which you see things. Because most of the person who sell the companies think, oh, you know what, if I could, or if they fail the company, if the companies fail, they say, oh, I should have done that. Well, I should have done that is a useless statement, you know, because I should have done that doesn't change anything. But if you put a mirror, let's say stay 4 years and say, look back and say, what would I have to do in order to achieve this success?
Hmm.
Then you have the time and the resources available to you to drive that success. So when you want to engineer a success, in the 7 year journey, I ask entrepreneurs to put a mirror at the stage at which they see the exit and say, what would you have to do to cause such an exit? And once such an exit can be designed, then the probabilities of getting that success, it doesn't happen. Yeah, it happens in a very small cases by chance. But isn't it better to design it, to engineer it, to effectively go after it through planning? Because it is your life that you are putting through this process. And that
Absolutely.
is where the 7 year journey map really, really helps.
Nice. This is just mind blowing. Like this kind of thing, and I'm sure the folks listening in, I mean, if they're getting ready to go on the journey, I know this is something that I thought for years was like, okay, if I'm going to be an entrepreneur, my end goal is to have a completed thingy that runs on its own and somebody's going to want to come buy it, or I could just walk away and just make money, right? And that's not the case. I mean, just like you said, you're engineering exits at every stage. It's okay, and it is considered a successful exit if you get halfway and you've engineered something that someone else can take and run with it. And there are people out there that do that. They look for 50% finished companies, 75% finished companies. And they're like, we've got the infrastructure in place to take this and run with it. And it's like handing someone a baton in a relay race. And I will say something too about the really the mental edge that you get as a result of engineering exits, the term you used, where uh, you get these hits of dopamine. Dopamine's a heck of a drug. I mean, I'm an addict to it. I love it. And I love when I get something done and my brain's like, yeah, good job. Pat yourself on the back. If you if you build these smaller goal points, these smaller successes, you get those dopamine hits a lot quicker, and it helps you propel forward and say, okay, well, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? Instead of just, this 10, 15, 20 year slog of, it's never going
Yes.
to be done. So that's awesome. That is awesome. So, measuring success, I think the biggest takeaway from this conversation today of the 17 takeaways that you've you've unloaded on me is you can measure success as a smaller exit. And you mentioned probability, which when you were talking about, okay, starting with an idea, there's a bajillion ideas out there, and you kind of filter it down until you've got like two people that can successfully get past, the seventh stage. I mean, it's almost like a sales funnel. Your input into this funnel is the idea generation, and you get a bunch of ideas, okay, and then just whittle it down, whittle it down. Okay, these ideas suck and these ones are pretty good. And okay, we're actually making it and make it into a reality. And that's just really cool. It's just really cool. So it's a combination of it's like a sales funnel, but also being mentally okay with the idea of, yeah, this isn't 100% done, but it's still a success. Making it this far into having a sellable thing that is absolutely a success. And that kind of flies in the face of the ego that you normally see in a lot of entrepreneurs these days. So I'm saying that as a person with that problem. So I had I have ego, and I'm working on getting rid of it, but it's a it's a 7-year process, Sanjeev. It'll take me 7 years to get rid of this ego. That's awesome. So that's your recommendation, huh? Is
Yeah. So
is
my
is take
thought
little things, get
process is,
yeah.
now see, an entrepreneur fundamentally, typically a first-time entrepreneur doesn't have by himself, in himself or herself, the credibility,
Hmm, right.
Now, so most entrepreneur, and there is a difference between a founder and an entrepreneur, which I also talk about the book. The founder is the guy with the idea. The entrepreneur is the executor of the idea into a business. Now, most people as founders try to transform themselves as entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
but there also are professional entrepreneurs who take an idea, and because they have a the history of success, uh, they have ability to attract capital and execute and stuff like that, and the founder then can be a founder of in the as a technology or whatever it is. So that's a separate sort of chapter we will have on a founder versus entrepreneurs and how to pursue that. But
Okay.
here I'm combining the roles of the founder and the entrepreneur together. And if that is the case, then it is critical, especially for first-time young or even older people, to establish success. And by driving and being aware, first thing is being aware of creating such exits, and then engineering them, or as I call them, driving them, is important. Because you see, you spend a lot of energy in building a company, and if you don't recognize that the outcome has to be successful, which is based on how to manage success. So let me give you an example again of the same thing of Juju Labs, but I can go into other ventures also.
Mhm.
Uh, in the case of Juju Labs, we did the development. I really knew I never wanted to be in the manufacturing because I was barely making 10, 12 bottles in the deck an hour, and the demand was placed on the company of delivering 5 million of these bottles, and it is impossible or insanity to think that you will be able to scale. So we set out to find the right manufacturing partner for it, and as difficult as it was in the area that we were looking, we're very fortunate to find one. And that changed just the way the credibility, because now even if the production demand is 10 million, we can beat that, and we are still in control of our technology, we are still in control of our destiny. And I am very sure that this infrastructure, as I said, because I have to walk the talk, is engineered for a very large Japanese company to acquire, because we are using their science and their knowledge with a US based infrastructure with a significant growth and revenue potential in a 36 to 48 month engineered period. So I, I do practice what I believe in, what I am writing. And so this is another sort of an actual hands-on example of what I just shared with you.
Nice. That is really, really cool. And the more I get to know you as a person, the more I'm like, man, this guy's got some experience. Like, I'm excited that we're talking about this book because I mean, there's just so much stuff to unlock, and I'm having a hard time not geeking out. Like, I normally wear my emotions on my face, but I'm like, yeah, I gotta hurry up and get to the next episode because there's just some really, really cool stuff. Um, well, I'm out of questions, man.
Well, I'm sure
I'm
you'll
out of
have some more,
questions.
but I do believe that we addressed your last things, which is the transition from the commandos to the you said in your last episode that you were concerned about the commandos too, and I wanted to keep that topic to this level to actually show an example of transitioning from commandos
Okay,
to a professional team. So that's what
that's
I
good.
covered in this conversation today
That's
also.
good. Well,
Okay.
that does a lot of good because I know that when I first started, I was in like the commando mode, and I'm working to get myself into this next mode. But sometimes I feel like I'm pushing against my own brain, like, come on, But it's not anything new. I can become that person, and I'm not obsolete. So it makes me feel better. So awesome.
All right.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode. And for the folks at home who are listening in, our plan is to have an opportunity for folks to dial in, ask some questions because, Sanjeev is putting together a community of people. He openly shares what he knows. He shares what he knows. He just dumps his whole brain into this book, What Not to Do in Entrepreneurship, but he also dumps his brain, heart, and soul into the community that he's creating surrounding this book. So in future episodes, sometime we're going to start having people on and they can ask questions online, offline, and he can answer them for you. So until then, we'll go ahead and cut this and we will be in touch with the next episode. All right, sir?
Th- Thank you so much, Michael. Good. Appreciate your patience and your persistence in making progress in this book. So,
Thank you, sir.
or
Well,
with
take
this book rather.
this book. Yes. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you much and take care and hope you have a good rest of the day. All right.
You too, sir. Thank you so much.